بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. For the nights I've been here with you, we've been speaking about different paradigms that are commonplace in our society, that we also sometimes adopt unthinkingly or unwittingly. And I've been calling them to our attention and finding different aspects of weakness in those paradigms and offering some either replacements or some tweaking of those paradigms so we can correct our understanding in a way that's in alignment with our Islamic teachings. The sixth paradigm, the one I want to speak about today, actually seventh paradigm that I want to speak about today is, it sounds kind of silly, but it's actually a very serious one. Religious people are not very nice. Right? I think this is a pretty common paradigm, it's something, especially if you, the increasingly loud voice of atheists, especially vocal, kind of belligerent atheists like Richard Dawkins and the likes of him, they pick on this aspect of religious people a lot as one of their many attacks on religion in general. Basically, they say that we're no better off for religion and religious people. In fact, we're worse off because of them. And they point fingers at religious kind of fundamentalist terrorists, for instance, who do terrible things in the name of their religion. Religious organizations that are sometimes backward thinking and against scientific advancement, against technology, against things that are very commonsensical now. Right? There's certain religions that are against things that is part of conventional wisdom that everyone accepts as true. They'll say it's false. Everyone else says it's good. They say it's bad. And so they point to these sorts of things and say basically religious people are not very good. They'll say it in much more graphic terms. But that's the gist of it, that they're not very nice. All right, so one question is where does the stereotype come from? The stereotype, unfortunately, comes from religious people who are not very nice, right? The unfortunate fact is that many people who are very devout in various religions. I'm not pointing to us right now in particular, but in general, people who are devoted to a particular religion do oftentimes tend to be self-righteous. Do oftentimes tend to be difficult to get along with, do tend to be obnoxious and kind of in your face and trying to push their religion on you in a way that makes you uncomfortable, these sorts of things, right? So unfortunately, it is a reality. Again, this is not supposed to be statistically correct, but it could just be the fact that the people who are like that are very outspoken. And so it seems like there are a lot of them. Right? Sometimes you might just have one bad apple, but that bad apple, is so bad, has so many worms, it stinks so badly, then it gives the impression that all the apples are bad. Right? So that could also be the case. But in any case, this characterization is not completely incorrect. There is grounds for the characterization. Why is it then, so let's assume that the characterization itself is true, that religious people do oftentimes tend to be not so nice. What is it about people who are devoted to their religion that makes them like this? Is it that they want to be obnoxious and they want to annoy people, they want to drive people away, or are there some other things that are going on in their own heads that manifests itself in this way that's negative, whereas their intentions are actually positive? One, I think, underlying cause for this is their own eagerness to share what they believe to be true. Right? To be fair, religious people, especially people who believe in a religion that is that makes exclusive claims on truth, where they believe that this religion is true, exclusively true, right? And they feel the need, the honest need to tell other people about this and inform them of that. Right, so that is a very good intention, and we also should share that intention. That is a good intention, but it sometimes manifests itself in not so nice ways, where they might become kind of overbearing. They might be overeager in how they present themselves in a way that not only doesn't attract people, but sometimes it pushes people away from even considering their religion and what it might have to offer. Sometimes they are impatient with others. Right? They themselves they could have been born into their religion, or maybe they came to it through some struggle, but now that they've found it and it's so crystal clear for them, they are impatient with others who can't see it as crystally clear as they can. And they forget sometimes the struggles they might have gone through, the doubts that they might have had, and all that they might have gone through, and they expect other people to just accept it right away overnight. Right? So sometimes that also leads to this kind of categorization or characterization of these people as being a little bit belligerent and obnoxious. Sometimes people who are religious, they have a sort of tunnel vision, a closed-mindedness, right? Especially if they come to their religious beliefs without reason, without thinking, contemplation. Right? They might have a tendency to only be able to see the truth in their religion, and they're always around their own co-religionists, and so they feel like, well, everyone, it's obvious, everyone believes the same thing. No, there are no objections. But anyone object to Imam Ali being the Imam? No objections here. It's done. It's easy. There's no discussion about it, because we all believe the same thing. So when we are only around the same kinds of people who think the same way, we're always preaching to the choir, we start to have this false sense of security about our beliefs, and we don't sometimes address the real questions that are there that need to be answered, especially for someone who's coming in, who's seeing these things for the first time. They need a lot more explanation, but we sometimes forget that, and we think it's obvious, it's clear, there's no question about it, everyone should see that, and the other people must simply be destined for hell, or they must be possessed by the devil, or they must be closed-minded. When in fact, sometimes we're the ones who might be closed-minded, or religious people in general might be closed-minded, not able to see other people's perspectives. Sometimes people who are following these religions, they might feel threatened, and that's why they become obnoxious. Especially if their religious beliefs are not through contemplation and reason, their beliefs are hanging from a very fine thread. They might feel like they're very solid, but they're actually on shaky ground because there's no real foundation under it. There's no rationale, there's no reason underneath it that really grounds their belief. It feels solid because they have each other to hold themselves up, right? But as soon as a very fundamental question is asked, then all of a sudden they feel very shaky. And so one of the responses they might have, instead of being honest, intellectually honest with themselves, saying, yeah, that is a good question, let me see if there's an answer for that. They might say, how dare you ask that question? They become defensive to try to protect whatever kind of false facade of a structure that they have of their belief, and because of that they become belligerent with other people. So these are some of the reasons. I'm sure there are many more reasons. Not always bad intentions, but sometimes misguided intentions and misguided ways of coming to religion that lead oftentimes to religious people not being so nice. And that's the paradigm that we're going to look at. Now, there's one underlying fallacy that I want to address in this way of thinking. And this is something that atheists, again, capitalize on. I recently read through Dawkins' new book, The God Delusion. So that's kind of fresh in my mind. One of the things he constantly does, and it's a hallmark of himself and other people, is that they generalize. One of their argument as atheists is against religion altogether. All believers in God are misguided to them. Right? So they don't differentiate amongst these misguided people. They're all misguided because they all believe in God and have different ways of practicing it. So one of the things they do is they oversimplify, they generalize, and they examine. And for the most part, he'll be responding and examining the most prominent religions. Right? So the different Christian denominations, especially the Catholic Church, or even kind of fundamentalist Christians. They are usually they take the brunt of his assaults, and then Islamic kind of these terrorist type people as well. They also come in second as his most kind of his biggest enemies, and so he takes these few groups and their problems with their religions, and then he generalizes and says, well, 90 whatever percent, 80 whatever percent of these religions is like this. And he's a scientist. The scientific kind of process also goes like that, where you examine, sample A and sample B and sample C, and you start to see patterns, and then you kind of assume that you extrapolate from that pattern that, the next sample is also going to be similar. right? It's inductive reasoning that leads him to this faulty conclusion, but sometimes convincing conclusion when the data is enough. When you have enough of these wackos out there, right, and those are the ones you're analyzing, and you're able to find all these weaknesses in all of their thinking, then you just assume that basically all the religions are the same way, right? So there's a generalization of all religions, and it is a fallacy, especially when you look at it from our perspective. As I was reading through his book, he would point fingers at different religions and their less than rational practices or beliefs. And I would also nod in agreement that yes, absolutely, that is false. I see exactly how that's false. Yes, that's false, that's false. And we can agree with all of them, but he never once analyzes Shia Islam. And our claim is the same at that level. That yes, all these other religions are false at some level. Some are completely false and some are less false, but all false nonetheless, except for this one, which is the Islam that the Ahlul Bayt have brought to us. Right, but that never works his way into his equation. We're not prominent enough to kind of be worthy of his attention, apparently, and thankfully so. So far, we've remained safe from that. But I think part of it is also that a lot of the arguments that he wages legitimately against other religions, we are immune from. Right. Okay, so I just want to throw that out there as well, that this argument that all religious people are like this is a fallacy, meaning a false way of arguing, that is based on this oversimplification and generalization of people that all religions must be like most religions, and that's not the case. Recite one salawat, please. All right, so with that under our belt, I'd like to move forward a little bit and turn it over to us. And I'm going to offer 5 or 6 points. And again, these are not the exclusive ways we can do this, but about 5 or 6 things that we can do to avoid fitting into this paradigm. So I'm not going to, in this case, some nights I've said the paradigm itself is false, and I've showed you why it's false. Here, I'm not saying it's false. It's a perception. And unfortunately, the perception is oftentimes true, especially the public image of many religions is the way it's sometimes characterized in this way. But there are many things that we can do, which are in fact simply abiding by certain parts of our religion. There's certain things that we can focus on in our own behavior that will immune us from being categorized like this. Right? So there's certain things that we can do, and I'll try to show some arguments for those, and sometimes some ahadith or Quranic verses to also help us to understand what are things that we can do so that we don't fit into this paradigm of being very obnoxious and kind of very difficult to live with, as some other people are. One of the most important things that we can do is to make sure that we learn, that we seek and pursue deep knowledge of Islam, and to pursue it in a way that leads to a deep level of understanding of our deen. That might seem like a pretty general thing to say, but it's extremely important. For many people I found, especially people who are born into Islam, Islam is something that we've just absorbed through osmosis, kind of just from the environment, from our family first and foremost, and then from the environment in which we live, because we've been involved with weekend schools and with these sorts of programs. So we picked up things here and there, and generally we have kind of a decent foundation sometimes from our parents, and that usually tends to be the extent of our education in Islam. One thing that I've noticed is that the learning curve for children, at least in healthy families where the parents are really taking an active role in educating their kids, their learning curve is very high in the beginning. Right? So children learn quite a bit early on, up to the ages of 5, 6, 7, that range. Then, unfortunately, I think a lot of parents I don't know exactly what the cause is, but I think sometimes parents let up a little bit. Maybe they think that, okay, that's good enough. Maybe because that's all they receive from their parents. Or for whatever other reason, they let up a little bit. A lot of times, weekend schools also tend to stop at a certain age, around middle school or so. And at a certain age, the growth of our children tends to level off. Where after that, they don't really learn as much, at least not in leaps and bounds, as they were for those first couple of years. And so I find that a lot of times we'll have adults who are very intelligent, very accomplished in their own fields. They can speak intelligently about so many other topics, but when it comes to Islam, oftentimes we have a very elementary kind of level of education Islamically. So it can be an adult, but they might, sometimes we use this in terms of literacy. We'll say that somebody has a 5th grade, for instance, level he reads at a 5th grade level, even though he might be a 9th grade or 10th grade or something like that, because of certain either learning disabilities or a lack of education or whatever else. Right? So the same thing happens with Islamic literacy. Sometimes we remain Islamically illiterate or Islamically literate at a very low level because there isn't any sort of systematic ongoing education in our community as of yet. And that's a deficiency in our community that we need to address. As a community, we need to start addressing that in a systematic way. One of the things that one of the efforts I've tried to make in the last couple of years is a curriculum that I put together specifically, it was primarily made for converts. I call it Islam 101, and it's a year-long course originally designed for someone who doesn't know anything, right? A new convert. The goal is in the course of a year, in 2 semesters, I take them through so that by the end they have a good grasp on all of their beliefs, all of the major practices of Islam, so they're full-fledged Muslims. They can be working Muslims, and then the goal is to kind of get them to the level where they can now integrate with the community and start to benefit from speeches, read books, and these kinds of things. One of the major goals I have in that class is to give people a sense of all the different categories of knowledge in Islamic studies. Right, so think about this. If you're getting into a new field, and you're exploring some new field, and you just pick up a random book, you see a title, you just pick up a random book and you read that book about that particular topic. By reading that book, you're going to get maybe some in-depth knowledge about one little slice of that field. But it doesn't really give you a sense of the breadth of the field. What else is there to learn? What are all the different categories of knowledge, different categories of knowledge that are related to that field? It doesn't give you that sort of sense. You need some sort of a full overview of the entire field. Then you see, okay, these are all the different kinds of knowledge that are out there, and it gives me perspective on what I know. I know this one little slice, but I see where I need to start and all the other pieces of the puzzle that I still need to put together. Right, we need that for Islam as well. In our Islamic studies, we should have an idea of, I think in terms like on your hard drive, you have all these different files, right? At least these different folders. So you want to at least, I give them a set of folders that are all labeled. I explain what the folders contain. I give them some information, some files to put in those folders, right? But now at least they have that whole filing system of all those folders in their head, and some content as well. And they now know that when they listen to a lecture on the imamah, for instance, they know where that fits in the bigger picture. What level is that? Kind of what had to come before I got to the level where I was talking about imams? I had to first have some basis in a grounding in Tawheed and the belief in Allah, and then the guidance system that he's started, and then the prophethood, and then the absence of prophets and the succession of the prophets. And you kind of have a perspective on where the discussion on the imamate fits in the larger context of Islamic knowledge. Then every lecture becomes much more meaningful. It's not just a random piece of information, but you now know where to file it away, and so it becomes an organized, kind of more of an organized system of developing your understanding of Islam. That kind of something like that is everyone should go through. I think it should be a requirement that everyone should hold themselves to going through some sort of system like that, where they learn their entire religion of Islam from the beginning to the end, at least at a very basic level. So they establish this basic Islamic literacy, and they have this level of understanding. What that does is it helps us to understand the depth of what we have. Because if I kind of hinted at it earlier, if my understanding of Islam is very weak, I just heard stuff, people have told me stuff, and that's the extent of my source. If you want to ask me where did I get that, well, I'll say my mother taught me. I'll say I heard it in the mosque. I heard it from some speech. I can't even remember who said it. Right? If that's the extent of our ability to kind of back up our beliefs, then of course that's very weak. Right? But if I've actually thought about it myself, or I've been shown the arguments for that particular thing, and I know that where it's based, I know that, at least I've seen the argument once that there's a verse of the Quran that's the basis for this belief. I've seen that verse myself, I read the verse. I may not remember it or anything, but at least I know that this belief is solid. It's based on something, and if I go back to my notes, if I go, do a little bit of work, I can find that verse and I'll realize the connection, the foundation for a particular belief. Now my beliefs become solid, and I also become much more confident in those beliefs. I don't feel a sense of vulnerability. If somebody asks me why I believe in the Imams, I don't suddenly feel threatened, that I have to become emotional and kind of angry at the person and say, how dare you challenge this, and get all emotional about it. I now know that I can be calm. Either I have the information or I don't have it at my fingertips, but I know I can find it and I can get back to you, and I can show you kind of the argument for why we believe that Imam Ali is the Imam after the Prophet, for instance. Right? So that will help us then to empower ourselves in a way where we don't have to be emotional, which is one of the things that really drives people away from religion, where people are kind of emotional where they should be rational. Right? Emotion has its own place, especially in these days. There's a place for emotion, a healthy emotion. That's not what I'm talking about. But that emotional kind of aspect which replaces, it becomes almost an argument. Right? That becomes the base of my argument. I get mad at the person. I frown at the person. I get all hyper because I'm trying to defend something that I'm desperately trying to establish as something that's true. Right, so I think that's one very important one important thing that we can do to avoid falling into this paradigm of being kind of irrational, emotional religious people, and instead we can be well-founded, reasonable religious people who understand their religion from a very deep level. That doesn't require you to go to the hawza. This is also a misconception. I think sometimes people think that if you're going to, the only way to get a deep understanding of the religion is to go to the hawza and become a specialist in Islamic studies. That's also not the case. The hawza, it has a special role to train. If I wanted to characterize it in a sentence, I would say that the hawza basically trains people to become in-depth researchers, so they can independently access the sources of Islamic thought and address issues as they arise. That's really what the hawza does. Right? So it gives you all of those tools that you need. It gives you the resources and the ability to be able to then go and kind of build this whole structure of Islamic thought from the bottom up. Right? And then if a new issue comes up, then you're able, you know how to address it, what resources to fall back to, how to think in a way that you can solidly establish a particular belief or a particular practice like that. Right? That's very important, and we need to access our scholars, but not every. You can have a very healthy level of Islamic literacy without the hawza. Right? What's needed though is the infrastructure of setting up an educational system, a curriculum of some sort for adult education of this kind, either a set of classes like I'm talking about, which I'm in the process of developing, or some similar system like that, where all adults then can go through that system, and everyone categorically should have a level of literacy. The same way, it'd be, I could assume that nobody here is illiterate in terms of, either English if that's their mother tongue or whatever other mother tongue they have. Right? That's just a general expectation that we now have in our societies, that everyone's literate to a certain level. Right? That same expectation should be there with Islamic studies. We should have Islamic literacy, because we are, in the end, responsible individually for our beliefs. You can't simply say, well, I think I believe this, or somebody said we believe this, so I'm going with that. That's not good enough. Beliefs are something you have to address on your own, and you have to have confidence yourself that, yes, I firmly believe this, and if it's challenged, if you have doubts, then you have to be able to address those things and answer those questions for yourself to solidify your beliefs. All right, recite salawat, please. A second quality that we can adopt and focus on is humility. Right, one of the things that those belligerent atheists kind of point a finger at is that people who are religious tend to be very arrogant. They tend to be very self-righteous and feel like I'm the holier than thou. That kind of all those phrases are used. that now I believe that I have the truth and you're following something false, therefore I'm better than you. Right, we've talked about this to some extent with these discussions on equality and differences amongst people, and I tried to emphasize that point that, let me repeat it because it's so important, because it's a very easy trap to fall into. The consequence of coming to the conclusion that this particular set of beliefs that are brought to us by our Prophet, by the Ahlul Bayt, are true and all else is false, should not be that I now feel I am better than other people in the eyes of God. I'm now, more favorable to Him, and other people are less than me. That should not be the consequence of it. Just the opposite, we should feel that sense of gratitude that I mentioned, indebtedness to Allah for giving us the tawfiq to be where we are, to guiding us to the sirat mustaqim, the straight path, right? That the fact that we constantly say ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, that should also remind us that we're not done yet. We're asking for guidance to the straight path. Right? If we're already home free, then we should say just alhamdulillah alladhi hadana lis-sirat al-mustaqim. Alhamdulillah that He's guided us to the straight path, and that's it. Now there's nothing more for me to do. We're asking Him guide us, continue to guide us on the straight path. Like, we shouldn't think of the straight path as a destination, but as a path, right? When you're going somewhere, your destination is not to get on the highway. Your destination is to get on the highway to get to someplace, right? Right. The sirat is that highway. It's the path, and to be guided. First of all, we want to be guided to the path, so we get to the right road. But then we want to make sure that we stay on that road. So we want to continue to be guided. And that's a lifelong struggle, to remain on the road after He's guided us to it. Right? And we need Him constantly for both those things. That dua that we say in Surah Ali Imran, it says, رَبَّنَا هَبْ رَبَّنَا لَا تُزِغْ قُلُوبَنَا بَعْدَ إِذْ هَدَيْتَنَا. Right? Don't let us swerve off the path after You've guided us to the path. Right? We're there now. Alhamdulillah, we're there. We believe in the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt and all of their teachings. But who knows what will happen tomorrow? Maybe some doubt will come and it'll overwhelm me so terribly that I'll give up. Or more often, maybe some hardship will befall me. Right? A lot of times people lose their faith not because of conceptual problems, but because of practical, real life problems. Some huge tragedy strikes them down. They've been doing everything they're supposed to do. They've been saying all their prayers. They've been praying to Allah, protect me from this and that. And then despite all that, something terrible happens. They lose their job. They lose the life of a loved one. And that sometimes shakes people's faith so terribly because they're not prepared for it. They don't understand how to put that in perspective, that they can lose their faith because of that. Right? We don't know. We could say that, okay, I think I'm set. I understand why bala happens to people. Theoretically, I'm all set. But until it actually happens, we don't know how we're going to deal with it. And so we should, even those of us, alhamdulillah, who are guided to the right path, we should be really scared constantly whether or not the next incoming doubt or incoming bala, hardship that befalls us, it might knock us off the path. Right? So that all that should lead us to gratitude to Allah for guiding us, and humility, and the sense that I'm not home free. I still have to work at it on a daily basis. And if I fail, even if I was good up to now, I can still fail from today on. Like Iblis was like that again, right? Iblis he had a great history, outstanding, to the extent where though he was a jinn, he was raised to the level of the angels. That's why when Allah says to the angel, the group of angels bow down to Adam, right? Iblis was also included in that because he was now at the rank of the angels. Because of it, through merit, he had reached that. He had worshipped Allah to such an extent. And proven himself to such an extent as an outstanding servant of God that he was elevated to that rank. Right? I mentioned that hadith from Imam Ali in Nahj al-Balagha, where he reminds us that Iblis worshipped Allah. He did one sajda that was 6,000 years, and he says, I don't know how to calculate those 6,000 years, whether it's the kind of years that we have now or something else other than this that was even longer. Right? But an immense amount of time. And then this one thing came, and he wasn't prepared for it, and there was something hidden inside that he never realized himself that he had, this kind of pride, and that pride and arrogance led him to rebel against Allah altogether. Okay. Let me. There's one hadith I want to read to you from Al-Kafi. This also kind of speaks to the same. There's a phrase here that's actually very challenging at first. It seems very hard to understand. This is in the book of Intellect and Foolishness from Al-Kafi. Imam Al-Kadhim alayhi salam is speaking to his companion Hisham ibn al-Hakam about the intellect. And this is a continuation of the hadith I read a couple of days ago about the majority and the minority. It's in the same hadith, number 12. He's speaking about different qualities. At the beginning he says, no person's intellect attains strength until several traits are found in him. Right? So he's giving us a list of traits that are indications to us that our intellect has reached a good strong level. If we're deficient in these things, that means we still have a ways to go. All right. So he mentions various things. He gets to a point. One of the things. Let me just read one of the things he says. He believes, a person with intellect, with strong intellect, believes in his heart, meaning sincerely, that all people are better than he, and that he is the worst of them. A person with intellect, with a high level of perfection in his intellect, believes that all people are better than he and that he is the worst of them. So compare ourselves to that. First of all, how do we? It's one thing to think generally it's good to have a good opinion about different people. One of the ways that we, in our commentary, we're able to kind of understand this. There's one of our great scholars, Fayd al-Kashani. So he interpreted this hadith like this. He said that these are the kinds of thoughts a person should have to be able to get to this level where he thinks other people are all better than him and he's the worst of them. He says, for instance, when he sees one with knowledge, he thinks he knows more than I, so he knows God better and knows how to please him better. Right? You have more knowledge than I do. Or let's think of it the other way. Someone with less knowledge, right? If you have less knowledge than I do, I have more knowledge. Instead of feeling proud and feeling better than you, the way I should think is one of the things that excuses us from sin and lightens our punishment before Allah is ignorance. Right? That doesn't mean we're supposed to go after, strive for ignorance and remain ignorant. Right? Willful ignorance is also problematic. Right? If people willfully stay ignorant, then they're liable for it. They're not excused. But ignorance, that's not of your own fault. Right? If you have less knowledge, instead of thinking I'm better than you because I have more knowledge, rather I should think, well, if you sin, you're gonna get off scot-free. Whereas if I sin, I'm in trouble. Right, we have a hadith like that say that an alim is taken to task for his sins for one sin before a person who's not an alim is taken to a task for 70 sins. Right, so you could someone who doesn't know about a particular law and is in the state of ignorance could commit the sin 70 times and just get just be punished once. Whereas the one who knows about the law is liable as soon as he commits the sin, he's in great trouble for it, because he willfully and knowingly committed that sin. Right? So the liability increases with knowledge, and that should be the thought that crosses our mind, not I'm now better than you because I have more knowledge. Or for instance, he says, if he sees someone who's older than he is, then he should think, well, this person, he's had longer to obey Allah. Right, this elderly person, elderly man or woman, she's lived much longer than I have. Who knows how much worship they've performed? They've had many more years to worship than I have and do good deeds than I have. Whereas when I look at a child or a younger person, a person who's younger than me, instead of feeling proud and arrogant, I'm older, I know better, and I'm better than you, actually, well, that person's had less time to sin against Allah than I have. Right? When he sees an unbeliever, he thinks perhaps he will die a Muslim, and perhaps I shall lose my conviction before I die. Right? When you see an unbeliever, instead of thinking, I'm better than this person, I'm a Muslim and he's not a Muslim, therefore I'm definitely better than he is. It's not the same thing as what we were saying yesterday, was that Islam itself is better than any other religion. That doesn't necessarily translate into I as a Muslim am better than somebody who follows another religion, because of the thing I said a couple of days ago, where judgment is not this absolute on some absolute standard. It's relative to our opportunities and our circumstances, which only Allah knows in detail. Right? So I'm a Muslim, maybe it's because I was born into Islam, maybe because it was laid right in front of me. It was very easy for me to become Muslim. Whereas for another person, maybe he hasn't been exposed to it yet. But who knows what's going to happen to that person, right? Maybe between now and his death, who knows how much he might be guided, how much righteousness he or she might be able to do. And who knows what's going to happen to me. I'm on the path now, alhamdulillah, but who knows if I'll be on the path until I die. Right? So if we have that kind of thought process in our mind, then it'll help us in this struggle to be humble. And once we have that humility, then we won't fall into this trap of being self-righteous and arrogant and holier than thou when we're speaking to other people. That humility will exude from us. Like we sweat, the humility will also just emanate from us, and they'll see that this person is, regardless of how knowledgeable he is, he's so good, he's so humble. He's willing to help me. He's willing to, speak kindly to me. He's patient with me. He answers my questions. Like all these different things, they'll notice that as a sign of this believer, and they'll be drawn to that. It's magnetic when you see people who are like that. Okay, recite with salawat, please. That's two. So seek knowledge at a deep level, be humble. A third thing we can do, be empathetic with other people. Empathy is this ability to put yourself in other people's shoes. See things from their perspective. Right? Like I mentioned, sometimes as believers, we put yourself in the situation where you're asking someone a riddle, for instance, and you know the answer. You know the riddle. You know the answer. It seems very obvious and clear to you. You know the answer already. But the person you ask it of, they might be totally dumbfounded. They can't connect the dots. They can't figure out how to get to the answer. So for them, it's very difficult because they don't have the answer. Once you see the answer, then it's very clear. Oh, of course, this is it. Right? Religion's sometimes like that. Once we see it, we've understood the whole picture. We've had much experience with the religion, and we've gone through this growth process in the religion. Everything's very clear for us. Right? But for someone from the outside, it's possible they have so many different things, different issues that are acting as obstacles for them, and because of so many different things, they're not able to see it as clearly. And just by answering one question or two questions or describing Islam for a few minutes to them, don't expect that all of a sudden they're going to see the light and say, oh, that's the religion for me, and jump on board. Right? Be empathetic with them. See how things look from their perspective, and that I think will make us more patient, more understanding of where they're coming from. There's so many things they could have. They could have a lot of baggage, especially nowadays. Imagine all the baggage someone would have if all the information they get about Islam is from media, for instance. Right? Predominant news media gives obviously a very negative impression of Islam, and so someone whose only exposure or predominant exposure to Islam is that, is going to categorize Muslims like all those other not so nice people that I mentioned in the beginning, right? And so they may not even entertain the possibility that this could potentially be a religion that's worthy of examining as a possible path for me to take. Sometimes people just are in a state of inertia, and we might also be in that situation where we're basically Muslim because we were born Muslim, and it's good enough, so leave well enough alone. That might be the reason why we're still Muslim. Not because we've actually examined it critically, we've actually explored other religions and compared their view of God to ours, their view of the Day of Judgment to ours, their system of justice, their system of law to ours. It may not be something so rigorous as that. So other people also are sometimes in that same boat, where it's very comfortable. You have a family, you have a church, you have a community of co-religionists who are all with you. So it's very easy to just continue on that path, and it's very hard, right? Only converts really know how hard it is, but it's very hard to break away from that. Because oftentimes when they do, they lose everything. Like they lose all of their whole connection. Imagine losing your whole family. Having your parents, your siblings, sometimes even your spouse turn their back on you, say, if that's your choice, then I want nothing to do with you. Right? That's a huge obstacle that's going to prevent someone from accepting the truth, even if they see that there's something good about Islam. But to do it, to get there, I have to give up everything in my life to get there. Right? So that should also be in our mind, that many people, for people to make this decision, they're going to have to sacrifice a lot. That doesn't mean that we say that they're fine, we should just leave them and ignore them or anything like that. But we still have the duty to do our best, and I'll talk a little bit more about how to do it. But at least it gives us that sense of empathy, that understanding that they might have a long way to go and obstacles in their path. There's one hadith I'd like to share with you that kind of speaks to this point. This is a hadith that we have from Imam Ali alayhi salam. And he speaks this or writes it in a wasiyah, an exhortation, a piece of advice to his son Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiya. This is different from his the letter that's quoted in Nahj al-Balagha, which is to Imam Hassan. Some of the phrases are common, but this is a different statement he makes. He says, "Ahsin ila jami' an-nas kama tuhibbu an yuhsana ilayk." Let me not jump the gun. Let me say one more thing, because this hadith actually contains a couple of these ideas, so I think it'll be better to kind of recap some of the other ideas with this. So let me add one more thing to the three we have so far. We talked about seeking knowledge at a deep level, being humble, being empathetic with others. The fourth thing is don't be afraid to be kind and fair with other people, even if they are following false religions. Right? Sometimes we might feel like we're on the right path, everyone else is on the wrong path, so they're all our enemies. We should hate them, we should not be good to them. And we kind of turn inwards and we say, like, I only want to deal with Muslims, I don't want to deal with anyone else. Now, I mentioned there are certain aspects of, part of that is true, but that's not exactly the right attitude. Right? We talked about not taking them as your closest and most intimate friends, your awliya. That's correct. But that doesn't mean that we can't have relations that are less than that. Less intimate than that with them. We can have professional associations with them. We can have, relations with our neighbors and things like that, where there's kindness and we're doing our neighborly duty to them and those kinds of things. Absolutely, those are all good, and we should be doing those. And in fact, those are the ways that we're going to be able to influence people and attract them and show them that this is a religion that you should also consider. There's a verse that encourages us to do this. This is in Surah Al-Mumtahana, chapter 60, verses 8 and 9. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم إن الله يحب المقسطين. So he says that Allah has no problem. He doesn't forbid you at all from being good and being fair with those kuffar, those unbelievers, who have are doing nothing to you. In the words of the verse, they're not fighting against you, they're not expelling you from your homes, right? Or in our circumstances, they're not bothering us. They have nothing to do with us. That's negative. These kinds of people are good, right? They're good. They're currently misguided. They're currently following a false religion, but there's goodness in them. And the vast majority of people are like this. Our neighbors and our coworkers and our associates at school and stuff, the vast majority of people are probably like this, right? So unless there's something that makes this person your enemy, where they are now trying to undermine you, they're trying to ridicule your religion, they're trying to pull you away from being ethical and moral, barring those kinds of things, there's no problem being good to them. We should be good to them. We should extend whatever kindness we can to them. And like I said, that's one of the ways to open them up to you, by having positive relationships with them. Right? Neighbors in particular, we have a lot of emphasis in Islamic teachings about being good to neighbors. And just like with our parents, like parents and neighbors, the duties we have towards them, they're not bound to religion. Even if your parents are following a false religion, you still have a duty to be respectful, kind to them. You still have to take care of them. All that stuff is still there. It doesn't matter if they're Muslim or not Muslim, Shia or Sunni or whatever. Right? The same thing for neighbors. Muslim or not Muslim, we still have duties towards them. Right? Okay. The following verse talks about the people who do have enmity. إنما ينهاكم الله عن الذين قاتلوكم في الدين وأخرجوكم من دياركم وظاهروا على إخراجكم أن تولوهم. So Allah, He only forbids you from being good and being, neighborly and those kinds of things with these people who are your enemies, who are showing animosity, hurting you, killing you, ridiculing you, and these kinds of things. That's where we have to draw the line. All right, so now let's go to that hadith of Imam Ali to Muhammad al-Hanafiya. He says, أحسن إلى جميع الناس كما تحب أن يحسن إليك. Be good to all people. He puts جميع الناس there. Right? Nas in general refers to all people, regardless of whether their religion. Even the Quran, when it says Ya ayyuhan nas, our commentators say that's an address to everyone. Ya ayyuhal ladina amanu is for the believers, for the Muslims. Ya ayyuhan nas is for everyone. So this is also, he's emphasizing that, and he puts jami as well to doubly emphasize, to all people. Be good to all people like you'd like all people to be good to you. Right? This speaks to empathy. This speaks to this idea of kindness. وَوَرْضَ لَهُمْ مَا تَرْضَاهُ لِنَفْسِكَ. Whatever you'd like them to do to you, you do the same to them. Right? The golden rule that we have from the Bible, from the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt as well. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. وَاسْتَقْبِحْ لَهُمْ مَا تَسْتَقْبِحُهُ مِنْ غَيْرِكَ. The same things you don't like other people to do to you, right? Don't do that to other people. If it's ugly from them when they do it to you, it's from their perspective, it looks just as ugly when you do it to them. Right? So that whole idea of empathy, putting yourself in their shoes, see what you look like from the outside. Right? Make that person a mirror for yourself and see what their impression is of you from your actions. وَحَسِّن مَعَ النَّاسِ خُلُقَكَ حَتَّى إِذَا غِبْتَ عَنْهُمْ حَنُّوا إِلَيْكَ. He says, be so good to people and make your character so beautiful to them that when you're absent, they long for your company. Right? It should be that we're so good to people, we're always doing favors, we're always there to help people to such an extent that the day you don't show up to work, everyone's like, oh, where is he? Where is she? She didn't bring my coffee today, or he didn't do this for me, or that he always does for me. Right? They should long for your company because you're always so good for them. All of a sudden there's a huge void in their life because you're absent. وَإِذَا مِتَّ بَكَوْا عَلَيْكَ. And when you die, they cry for you. They mourn your death. They mourn your absence. وَقَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ وَلَا تَكُنْ مِنَ الَّذِينَ يُقَالُوا عِنْدَ مَوْتِهِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Don't be somebody that when they die, everyone raises their hands saying, praise be to God that he's finally gone. We're finally relieved of him. Right? That's a great. Sometimes people will say, like, I think this is even like a motivational, what do you call it, like a self-help type technique where they say, for instance, write your own elegy. Right? Imagine you're at your own funeral. What would you say about yourself, or what would other people say about you? Right? The same idea. Live your life in a way where people long for your company when you're gone, when they're hurt and they mourn your loss, not that they feel glad that you're finally out of their hair. وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ رَأْسَ الْعَقْلِ بَعْدَ الْإِيمَانِ بِاللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ مُدَارَاتُ النَّاسِ. He says one of the most important things that you can do, one of the most important things that our intellect has a role in doing, besides establishing our faith for ourselves, is establishing these good relations and this ability to kind of get along with people. Mudarat is this ability to get along with people. To get along with people, it has to be a lot of give and take, a lot of compromise, right? And that's one of the things that's a sign of someone with a very strong intellect. Sometimes we think people with strong intellects, they're the ones who are very strict and hard-headed, and they have their own way, and you can't really budge them or talk to them. That's just the opposite. Someone with a strong intellect is really easy to get along with. They're easygoing. Right? They know where to compromise. They know which battles to surrender to because they're not too important. They have the bigger goal in mind. Right? That kind of a person. Think of the Prophet. Right? Think of the personal insults that would come. He'd ignore it. He'd turn it around. Right? If it came to the religion, that's a separate issue. But if it came to personal insults and personal kind of issues, he was willing to forego all of that. وَلَا خَيْرَ فِي مَنْ لَا يُعَاشِرُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ مَنْ لَا بُدَّ مِنْ مُعَاشَرَتِهِ. Right? If you have no choice but to interact with certain people, right? then the only way to live is to figure out a way to get along with them. You don't have a choice. You're stuck with them. You're in the same community with them. You're in the same family with them. Your siblings, for instance, your parents, your children. You can't choose these. You can't kick that person out. You can't abandon the community and say, I don't like this one person, so I'm never going to come to the community, to community functions again. I don't like my siblings, so I'm going to, never going to talk to them again. Right? We can't do that. Certain units, certain places, we have to figure out a way to get along with each other. Same thing at work, right? In school, and different places like that. So when you have to, then figure out a way to get along with them. حَتَّى يَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ إِلَى الْخَلَاصِ مِنْهُ سَبِيلًا. And do your best until finally Allah finds a relief for you. Either one of you dies, one of you moves away, something happens, someone gets fired. Right? So eventually something will happen that will set you at ease. But until that time comes, you have to make do and make the best you can of the situation. فإني, the last line, he says, فإني وجدت جميع ما يتعايش به الناس وبه يتعاشرون ملء مكيال ثلثاه استحسان وثلثه تغافل. He says that in my wisdom, in my experience, this acquired wisdom that I have over all these years that I've been observing how relationships happen and these kinds of things, I figured out there are two key ingredients to getting along with people. Right? One of them is twice as important as the other. He says one is two-thirds of the whole and one is only one-third of the whole. Right? The one that's twice as important as the other is to be assume the best of what other people say and what they do. Right? Ihsan is to actually do good to people. He doesn't mention that here. He mentions istihsan, which in the context, what I think it means here is to consider what is done to you or what is said to you as hasan, as good. Right? What that means is to assume the best, to take everything in the best possible light. So someone says something, you assume that they had some reason for saying it. Assume that they meant it as a joke. Assume that it was just a passing comment. Just find some excuse. We have that idea of coming up with as many excuses as you can for statements that people make, right? Before you jump to a conclusion that they must have meant something bad. They must have tried to insult me. They must have had a bad intention. Like, first and foremost, come up with every excuse you can to try to figure out how could what they have said, what they did, how could it mean something good for me, right? And the second thing is taghaful, to kind of turn a blind eye and kind of play, not play dumb, but kind of turn a blind eye to the things that you see. Right? People, if you can't figure out a way to twist that person's word into something good, then pretend you never even said it. And if you do those two things, if those are your two kind of arsenal, things in your arsenal, then you'll be set. You'll be able to get along with everyone. Right? I think it's very, very wise. Hard to do, but very, very wise. And he can see how successful you could be if you were able to accomplish these two skills. If we were able to accomplish these two skills in our dealings with people. Okay. Two last quick things. One is have patience. Right? We're looking for qualities that we can develop in ourselves to remove ourselves from this paradigm of being kind of weirdos and obnoxious people who are following different religions. Right? If we follow these kinds of things, we won't be like that. We'll be the most rational, level-headed, kind, good-hearted, generous, religious people that anyone's ever seen. And naturally, they'll incline to, what are you doing? What drug are you taking that gets you to where you are? I want some of it too. Right? So be patient with them. It's part of putting yourself in their shoes. Again, understanding all the things that they potentially are having to deal with if they're even going to consider another religion from where they are. Right? And understand that it takes time to understand things, to comprehend things. Sometimes you need to ask it several times. Sometimes you need to hear it different ways. And then there's going to be so many different issues that they have to deal with. So many misconceptions they have to clarify before they can say that, okay, Islam's not as bad as I thought it was. Right? Before they get to that point, they have to wipe clear so much filth that they've heard about Islam. Right? It's going to take time, so we have to be patient with them. That'll help us not to be overbearing, overeager. Right? And that's the last thing. Just don't be overeager. Don't push people. Don't be kind of in their face. So the way, I mentioned this yesterday, again, let me just recap it because I think it's an important thing. When we are trying to influence people, let us lead with our actions and with our words. model Islamic teachings and Islamic values first. Let that be the way we lead. And don't lead with poignant questions, putting people on the spot, telling them you should really consider Islam. Any of those kinds of abrasive and in-your-face ways, they don't work. Especially in this culture, they don't work. Right? Maybe in your experience you've found a different way, but in my experience, they don't work. Right? And since they don't work, we shouldn't do them, because the whole idea in doing this is to actually be effective in guiding people, not in pushing them away. We're not trying to just do itmam al-hujjah in any which way, and even if we have to be abrasive and abusive and push them away, at least I've done my duty. It's his problem if he doesn't accept it. That's not. I haven't done my duty if I've done it in an abrasive way, in a way that pushes them away. It's not itmam al-hujjah. That itmam al-hujjah happens when the person's intellectually content with the answer. He understands the truth, and then he still chooses not to accept it. But until that point, the duty still has to be done. He still has to be taught. He still has to be patiently shown the way before the hujjah is complete for him. Okay. Any questions? Very good. Either you're asleep or I was very clear. Last chance for Hassan.
You mentioned that you have developed the curriculum for the convert. That curriculum might be a little bit trivial for the Muslim teacher.
Yeah.
So have you thought about the developed curriculum that is kind of for the Muslim that people just boost their understanding?
Yeah, so he's asking about the curriculum I mentioned. He said it probably would be too basic, too elementary for people who are already Muslim. So what about for people who are more advanced? That's possible. It would take at least the people. So the history of the class, I started about three and a half years ago, and I started just for converts. I advertised it for converts locally in Dearborn, and one Muslim showed up. One born Muslim showed up. He didn't pay attention to the fact that it was for converts, and he begged to stay in the class, and I was really adamantly against it. I said, no, I don't want any Muslims, born Muslims in the class, because you'll complicate things. You'll ask the questions. You jump ahead, and you already have all these doubts and questions in your mind. You'll start asking all these other questions, and it'll confuse everyone. I want to go step by step and take things at a very slow pace. He said, I promise, I'll pretend like I'm a convert. I won't ask any questions except for what we're dealing with in class. And he loved it. He never missed. He was the only one who never missed a class. Sometimes the converts would come and go. He never missed a class. And he's a very successful person in the community, president of one of the societies that we have there, and successful businessman, all this stuff. Very, very busy person, but he made time for this class. The next year, he got his whole real estate team to all join my class. Right, his brother and all of his cousins and everyone, they all joined the class. And from then, I got the idea that it is actually very useful for Muslims as well. So this past year, actually more born Muslims came than converts. And it was really, really good. Even an elderly uncle and auntie from Pakistan, they attended the class religiously every day, and it was mind blowing for them, because they went through the same problem that I mentioned. They were born Muslims. They had gone through a lifetime of majalis and these kinds of things, but it was still haphazard knowledge. To hear everything systematically, to have reasons for things, to understand what's religion, what's culture. All that stuff was so important for them. So, it might sound very basic to go back to the beginning, but at least in the experience I've had with people who are born into Islam, they haven't felt that. They found that it was actually very, very beneficial for them. Yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teach Muslims when they talk to non-Muslims to invite them to common things, right? قل يا أهل الكتاب تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء بيننا وبين. We are multi-ethnic, multicultural community, and the same thing even in Muslim community around the world. Instead of people using that as a lesson to use it among themselves, they end up, instead of dealing with each other on a common basis, they go and treat each other based on differences.
Right.
Do you have any thought about that, or how we could
absolutely
over that?
Yeah, so these same principles that go for non-Muslims, they go even to the nth degree for Muslims themselves. Right? Muhammadur Rasulullah walladina ma'ahu ashidda'u 'alal kuffar ruhama'u bainahum. Right? We're supposed to be severe with the unbelievers and merciful amongst ourselves. That's how the Prophet and his companions were amongst themselves. Right? And so if this is the level of compassion we're trying to show for unbelievers, right? Again, recognizing that what they believe is false, but recognizing also that all these things are there. I need to be humble, I need to be helpful, compassionate, all these different things for them, then for my own believing brothers and sisters, how much more merciful and compassionate and understanding and all this stuff should I be? Should I not be? Or should I be? Right? Cultural differences are sometimes as hard to overcome as religious differences. Right? Just think of the debates and the fights that happen over cultural things, the alams, for instance, matam, languages of poetry, and all these different things that people have problems with. Sometimes they're as divisive as religion is itself. But our attitude to each other should be, we should never even think about fighting about these sorts of things. Disagree, find a way to resolve it, to compromise, find information, find a path, keep your goal in mind first and foremost. Keep your goal in mind, like what are we trying to strive for, and then figure out a way to work together to achieve that. That's not divisive for the community. Yeah. Sister?
I know you're talking about more like how to talk to non-Muslims and things like that. Sort of going ahead a little bit, if somebody's like a Sunni Muslim, for example, there's a good starting point, and they're maybe already interested in Shia Islam, but it's hard for them to completely go there. Like the concept of Imam is kind of hard to swallow. So what is a good starting point or basic proof to give to someone, to sort of, especially when there's so many different kinds of Shias, and
right.
This is a concept that came after the Prophet. So like, what is a good starting point?
Yeah. Is the question clear for you all? What is the, yeah, you heard it as well. Repeat it. Okay, so she asked, so for instance, with someone who's a Sunni, what's a good starting point to introduce them to Tashayyu'? I think that probably the most important thing to say is go back to that first point that I mentioned, the education. I'm wary of us taking this responsibility to guide people to the level where we try to teach people or give people information when we ourselves are deficient in our knowledge and information. That can actually be more destructive sometimes than useful. So I caution you against that. Right? What you can do is what I said, model Islam to the best of your ability. Focus on yourself and educate yourself. Make sure you know your deen inside and out to the level that you need to know it. You're practicing it the right way. And then, once you have solid knowledge about something, then yes, you can share it with people. Then you can inform people about it. But I think a lot of times people come to me with questions that are, they say, I'm in this debate with my college Sunni buddies, and they're asking this and that, and I have no idea what to even say. Like, why are you in a debate with your Sunni friends? Who puts themselves into a debate when they're not qualified for the debate? I don't put myself in a position of a debate with anyone. I personally hate debates, but I don't think it's a forum for education and for thinking and thinking in a very kind of calm and rational way. This discussion I mentioned that I'm having with this Christian, the exact reason why he and I both love the discussion so much is because from the get-go we decided it's not a debate. We're not going to be at each other's throats trying to pin the other one down. We're trying to understand what the other person is saying, and then very thoughtfully responding to it and saying, I see this hole, what about this? And then let them respond calmly. Right? And so it's a very thoughtful process where we're actually trying to understand and actually trying to find true faults or truths in each other's faith. Right? So I digress a little bit, but my point is, don't put yourself into these positions if you're not qualified for it, because you can do more harm. Then you get into that position where you have to become defensive and say, this is why I believe in, and you don't have any good reasons, but you've heard this and heard that, and it's all hearsay, and that's not a good argument. One thing you could do is, first of all, educate yourself, but in the meantime, there are also certain books that are good. There's one book in particular called The Succession to Muhammad by Wilfred Madelung. And that's a very well-recognized book. He's a very prominent Western scholar of Islam, and he's written a book that's very strong and very well accepted in the academic world, and that's helped a lot of people, a lot of Sunnis also see historically. So that book, read through it yourself first, study it yourself first, and that's also something I think you can either get help from to argue your points, or at least refer people to that book as a good source. And there are probably others as well, but this is one that comes to mind. Okay. I'm going to read a little bit about, actually, how much time do we have? Yeah. Let me just mention one more thing, because I think this is also, what I'm going to say is also related to that. One of the important issues I wanted to mention is when you're dealing with people, one of the important distinctions we need to make is to make a distinction between religion and culture. Right? And that becomes easier once you educate yourself more in the religion, in a very sound academic way, intellectual way. And I say that that's important because for somebody coming into the religion, or a Sunni coming over, or even our own kids, when we tie cultural elements too closely into religion, and we don't distinguish between them, we're creating even more obstacles for a person when they're trying to come into the religion. It's hard enough just to like come to grips with the daily prayers, for instance, or just to well, let's take this example. Just to come into this lecture and come into a mosque that is decorated like this, which is very unusual for someone. It's hard enough just to come and follow the lecture. But then if we add a lot of other baggage, which is going to push the person away, then we're doing an injustice to the person. That's one of my arguments against, for instance, having lectures in other languages besides English in America here, right? I understand there's a need, some older people aren't able to understand, so maybe they could have separate functions to address those needs. But the mainstream lectures need to be in English because we want to make sure that we're not holding Islamic knowledge hostage of a particular language. That you can't understand Islam unless you know Urdu. You can't understand Islam unless you know Farsi. Right? Islam is not Farsi and Urdu, or Arabic, or even Arabic. Right? They're universal ideas and concepts that are there for all humankind. It's really struck me this one time. This fire marshal was in Dearborn was interested in Islam, and so people periodically will come and come talk to me. So this fire marshal came in. He was very he experienced different Islamic events and different. He read a lot of books and things like that. And one comment he made, he said that Islam, as beautiful as it is, it feels very foreign to me. Right? If you think about that, that's such a shame that we have made Islam foreign to somebody. Islam is universal. The ideas, the teachings, everything about Islam is for all humankind. How is it that Islam now feels foreign to someone, where he feels like, if I'm going to convert to Islam, I also have to become Arab. I also have to eat a certain kind of food. I also have to dress a certain way. I also have to do all these different things. It's not just a matter of accepting beliefs and learning these practices and changing my lifestyle in the Islamic way. I also have to adopt a whole new culture. That was his impression, that to become Muslim I have to become, in that case it was Arab because it was Dearborn. But I think someone might have the same impression in a community like ours here. As diverse as it is, it still has very certain cultural elements. That doesn't mean, I don't mean that we should get rid of, wash and clean up all culture, but just be very thoughtful about how everything is perceived, how do certain things that we do that are not actually part of Islam, right? Not that they're contrary to Islam, but they're not part of Islam. Are they going to serve our greater goal, which is to educate ourselves, which is also to educate other people, right? Are they serving that purpose, or are they hindering that purpose? And if they're hindering it, then very thoughtfully and very kind of cooperatively and in a good way, we should rethink them and see maybe there's a better way to do things so that we can get kind of to a common denominator where it's Islam and we have a more organic culture that is American, that is comfortable. Even Americans can come in and they can identify with it, they can see it, and it doesn't seem like it's something foreign anymore. Rather, it seems very beautiful. It seems like now I understand the ideas. I understand the beliefs are correct, so I can accept it, and the transition will be relatively smooth for me to come in. Okay, I got out of that because like one of the things I got some objections that I'm reading stories from kind of random people, different companions of Imam Hussein. I'm not sticking to the traditional people for each night, and that is a cultural thing. There's nothing written that says that a particular person has to be remembered on a particular night. It's a convention that's come up in whether it's in Iran or in the subcontinent or wherever it's been derived, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing religious about it either that we have to somehow do it. And if we don't do it, something's wrong. We haven't fulfilled our obligation to remember Imam Hussein. Right? Tonight, by chance, I chose Ali Akbar, who also is the person that's traditionally remembered on this night, but it's not necessary to choose a particular person. When all of Imam al-Hussein's companions had been killed, only 18 men from the Banu Hashim remained. All were from the progeny of Abu Talib and Fatima bint Asad. 6 were the sons of Ali ibn Abi Talib. 3 were the sons of Al-Hasan ibn Ali. 2 were the sons of Al-Hussein ibn Ali. 3 were the sons of Aqil ibn Abi Talib. 2 were the sons of Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar. The first to proceed to battle was Ali ibn al-Hussein al-Akbar, Imam al-Hussein's eldest son. He had been born in the year 33 after the Hijrah, according to some reports, making him 27 years old, according to some reports. His mother Layla was the daughter of Maymuna, who was the daughter of Abu Sufyan, thus making her Yazid's first cousin, and him Yazid's nephew. He requested permission from his father, and it was granted. As al-Hussein sent him to the field, he pointed toward the sky with both hands and said, "O Allah, you be my witness over them. A young man is going out to fight with them, who is the most similar person to your messenger Muhammad in appearance, manner, and speech. Whenever we long to see your messenger, we would look at him. O Allah, deny these people the blessings of the earth. And when you have denied them, divide them and ruin them and scatter them, and let those who rule over them never be pleased with them. For they called us and promised to help us, then they turned on us and have fought us and murdered us." Then Imam al-Hussein yelled at Umar bin Sa'd, "What do you think you are doing? May Allah wipe out your lineage and deny you His blessings and all that you do. May He release upon you one who will slaughter you while you sleep. For you have wiped out my lineage and have ignored my kinship to the Messenger of Allah." As Ali ibn al-Hussein al-Akbar advanced toward the enemy, he chanted, "Ana Ali ibn al-Hussein ibn Ali. Nahnu wa bayt Allahi awla bin Nabi." I am Ali, the son of Hussein, the son of Ali. I swear by the house of God that we are closer to the Prophet. I swear by God that this son of a bastard shall not rule over us. I shall attack you with my lance until he falls to his knees. I shall strike you with the sword until he submits, with the blows of a son of Hashim, a son of Ali. The first Kufan warrior he met was Bakr ibn Ghanim. At seeing this accursed man take to the field, al-Hussein's face paled, and Ali's mother Layla asked if something had happened to him. Al-Hussein told her that he was about to fight with someone because of whom he feared for his son's life. He commanded her to pray for her son and quoted the Messenger of Allah, who said, "A mother's prayer for her child is answered." Ali ibn al-Hussein al-Akbar fought fiercely. He returned to his father, who told him, "Return to the battlefield. I hope that before evening your grandfather will quench your thirst with a chalice filled to the brim with a drink, after which you shall never thirst again." As Ali ibn al-Hussein al-Akbar re-entered the battlefield, a person from the Kufan army called out, "O Ali, we wish to take into consideration your kinship to the commander of the faithful Yazid. If you wish, we shall grant you amnesty." Ali retorted, "My kinship to the Messenger of God is more deserving to be taken into consideration than my connection to Yazid." As Ali ibn al-Hussein al-Akbar fought, Murrat ibn Munqidh al-Abdi said, May all the sins of the Arabs be upon me if I don't bereave al-Hussein of his son." With this, he ran a spear into Ali ibn al-Hussein's back. Then he struck him on his skull, and the rest of the Kufans began striking at him with their swords. He fell forward and wrapped his arms around his horse, at which his horse mistakenly took him deeper into the ranks of the Kufans, where they cut him to pieces. At seeing this, al-Hussein called out, "May Allah curse these people who have killed you, my son. How insolent have they been with Allah, respecting the sanctity of the Messenger of Allah. I throw dirt on this world after your death. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين.